Thanks, Don. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody. Hopefully, we are coming through loud and clear. For those of you that joined our discussion the other day, we went a little bit into some of the technology of how the ink comes out of the printer and some of the things that the printer is designed to do in order to keep that working efficiently. But today we wanted to talk about the ink specifically, and I've got my coworker and peer, Scott Champeau, here from the Texas office.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. So before we begin, we just want to thank Reece for putting this on. This is a great opportunity for us to connect with everybody in the current situation. We couldn't be more excited about the opportunity to be a part of this. Reece has been a great partner of ours for many years, and we look forward to providing you some information. At the end, we'll take some questions, and we will also provide some guidance either through phone numbers or anything else. So let's get started. So first and foremost, Mimaki is very unique in that we manufacture all of the inks that go through our architecture, as well as the machine, the electronics, the software. We're 96% in-house manufacturing. So we manufacture everything from the supply chain all the way through. And what ends up happening is we can continue to bring cost-effective products to the market, but it really gives us a lot of control over the expectations of the product itself. And the ink is a big critical part of that. So the ink you choose is key to the applications that you want to produce. And every product that we come to market with has some sort of an idea of what type of application range that should be expected with it. But there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. And I want to be clear on that as we go through this. There's always going to be a time where one ink might work better for a particular application than another. There's no one-size-fits-all solutions. And we know this really well because we manufacture everything. We also have inks in textile. We have inks across a wide variety of different spaces. So we really know the ink part of it very efficiently. And we know what happens if you don't have the right ink for the right application. So as we navigate through this, I'm going to give you some high-level overview of ink. And hopefully this will provide some guidance as to where you might find yourself if you have a piece of equipment, what limitations you might experience, or if you're looking to add a piece of equipment, what you might want to reach out to Reece and talk to them about based on what you're trying to do. So before we get into the traditional signage inks, I thought it was a good spot to start where we kind of came from. So everybody's pretty much familiar with aqueous ink. I think everybody's probably got a desktop printer. That's an aqueous ink technology. Historically, we had some wider format machines that were available, and there's still a few that are available out there for photography production and things like that. But basically, the aqueous ink requires a coated media. So typically, the printer and the ink are less expensive because there's not as much chemistry there. There's not as much from an engineering standpoint to work with. But the materials themselves can tend to be a little bit costly. Now, this isn't as commonplace in the signage market as it has been 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But aqueous ink does still have a place in the market. So there are a few products out there. Mimaki has an aqueous ink that we've carried, but we don't really sell that product anymore in the US market. But we do have some references to it on our website if you happen to navigate there. But this is kind of where everything started, right? So this usually has the highest color gamut. It's usually the widest range of colors available. But the drawbacks, again, are going to be the coated media that's needed, the fact that the ink itself is aqueous. It can be very easily reactivated through cleaning or any type of wetting. If you get moisture on it or you get any humidity issues in your environment, the ink can smudge or move or it's not stable. So it typically requires lamination, which adds to that cost. So again, the printer and the ink may be inexpensive, but you will end up having additional production costs towards the end. So you have to worry about the coated media. It has to be compatible typically with the ink that you're printing with, and then you have to worry about lamination after. But this is kind of the starting point of where wide format grew from. As we go through the aqueous ink, you'll find that there are other aqueous inks available in the market, and sublimation has become a very popular one. Sublimation is an ink that works through a transfer process, and I've got two representations up here on the screen of how that works. But basically, it works through a printing onto, again, a coated media, and it requires heat and time in order for that ink to outgas onto the material. And in this case, it'd be polyester. So what happens is we print to either a transfer paper or a pre-treated fabric, for example, and then we would put it through some sort of a heat press, either a calendared heat press or a stamp press, and that time and that temperature would allow the ink to activate, and it would become part of the polyester through an outgassing process called sublimation. The pros to it is it has, again, a high color gamut. It's really good for color range, fantastic for small projects like polyester keychains or coffee mugs, and it's really good for sportswear apparel and also for display graphics, which is primarily where we see a lot of it in our space, is the display graphics side. Great color range, great durability. Once the pigments are part of the, requires some sort of a coated process. It requires either a coated transfer paper or a coated fabric, and it's not very fade resistant. So if you're going to bring a polyester good outside and leave it outdoors, typically you're going to fade in a pretty short time range because it doesn't have the UV inhibitors in there to prevent it from fading. And it is a water-based ink, so it's just more susceptible to weathering and things like that. So it's typically not good for an exterior environment, but it's really good for display graphics and some of the other things that you might want to do, like home furnishing, sportswear and apparel, flag and banner, for example. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, but again, it's a polyester-based material limitation there, and it does require some sort of a post-process, either a stamp press or a calendared heat press, both of which, if you're interested, Reece has access to, and they can walk you through that piece of equipment. Further to that, one of the products that we also manufacture, which has also become somewhat popular in the space, is latex. Latex is a product that has become popular over the years, but from our side, we know that there are some limitations because it is a water-based ink. But I wanted to touch on it today, even though we've really focused more of our efforts in some other areas. The latex technology has been fairly stable. It usually has a higher color gamut than some of the other inks, again, because it's water-based. It can be printed, in this case, to some coated and uncoated, which is kind of the interesting thing about latex, is that it doesn't necessarily require coated media. It does require a heat fixation process, though, that can be detrimental to your effort. So if you're heating up PVC, or if you're heating up a plastic or something like a static cling, for example, they don't tend to perform very well because of the heat that's required in order to get the ink to cure. It either expands or contracts or distorts the material inefficiently, and it creates a problem for you either through the application side or even...
Michael?
Yes.
If you could hold just for a moment, we are not getting any sound. Let me ask if they can hear us now. Okay, everybody, I'm going to try something. Can everybody hear me now?
I can hear you.
I know, so we can hear each other.
I can hear you.
All right, what I'm going to do. All right, yeah, some people are getting sound, some people aren't. I think it's on the other end. We just have to plow through this. So there's a lot of people on webinars, I'm sure, and everybody's getting different signals. So I'm sorry, Michael. Continue on.
No problem at all. No problem. We want to make sure. Look, that's the world we live in, right? Everybody's got to worry about connectivity issues and everything else. So I'll keep going, and then at the end, if we have anybody that wants to connect with us individually that has some questions, we can do some call outs after. So back to the latex conversation specifically, it does have kind of a unique property in that it can be produced onto coated and uncoated media, which is a great value to that. But the problem with latex is, again, as it's water-based, it doesn't really have the long-term outdoor durability that you may be looking for. It has longer outdoor term durability than some of the other inks in the aqueous space, but it does require some sort of protective if you're going to go outdoors. So lamination is required for exterior applications, which can bring the cost of the materials up for you. Not here to argue whether or not you should or shouldn't laminate, but there is a cost involved with bringing a laminate into the discussion. And that heat is also another critical thing for the latex. So the latex creates a challenge for materials, and the space that you can produce on a latex product is fairly finite as a result of the heat. So basically the materials that are available today haven't really changed in a few years. And we identified that early on with our latex product, which is why we've kind of focused on other areas. But the latex is something that should be discussed, and it does have a place in some areas. But most of it is for multi-purpose, right? So if you're trying to do a little bit of everything, it's a great product or great starting point. But if you really want to get into more specialized printing, sublimation or the other two inks that I'm going to get into, solvent and UV curable, may be better for the for your business. So solvent is the most adopted, most well-known in the wide format exterior space. Most customers look at this solvent and understand that you can use it for vehicle graphics and vinyl banners and poster boards and all kinds of exterior graphics. But solvent's also really good for interior graphics, and that's something that tends to get lost in the conversation. Even though, yes, most of the focus historically has been for exterior types of printing, there's a lot of interior printing as well. There are canvases that are available. There are all kinds of different things, static clings, there are wall graphics. There's a lot of different things you can do with solvent. And solvent has a great color gamut, but it has the highest durability of any of the inks because of the way that it works. So again, that representation you see on the top of the screen there, it works by becoming part of the material that you print it to. So it works by becoming physically part of that material. It's really tough to scratch off. You're going to end up breaking the material down before you get the ink out of it. It's ultra stretchable as a result of that. It adopts the characteristics of the media. So if you're printing on a matte media or if you're printing on a gloss media, for example, it's going to look like that film when it's done. And lamination is not necessarily required. Again, I'm not going to argue whether or not you should or shouldn't laminate, but in a lot of cases, you don't need to laminate, and you can get away with producing signage that's going to last for quite a bit of time outside, even without lamination. The drawback to solvent is that it does require some time for that process to occur, and that's what we usually call outgassing. That outgassing process could be anywhere from a couple of hours to a full day, and it depends on how much coverage. There's a lot of variables there, but that is basically the only drawback to solvent. It's a stable technology. It's been around for a long time. It's the most popular ink in the wide format space for a reason, but it does require some outgassing. So if you're looking to improve your workflow and deliver in a much faster time frame, what we found is that the UV curable space is a better solution. And over the past few years, Mimaki specifically has put a lot of time and effort into the UV curable space. And you'll notice that there are a lot of products on our portfolio that are UV curable focused. The reason being is that we see this as the future of all wide format technology for a wide variety of applications. Solvent is not going to go away. It's not going to be something that we're going to see completely disappear, but we do see the UV curable space as a great addition to any shop that's using solvent for specific outdoor applications that need to be able to be a little bit more flexible in what they can do, and also offer some higher value, maybe higher profit applications. So what UV curable brings to the table is the instant cure features, right? We don't have to worry about a heat process. We don't have to worry about coated material. We don't have to worry about outgassing. As soon as the light hits the ink is automatically turned into a solid. So by this process, it's able to be printed very efficiently, and we can do some really neat things that are available, like layered printing. We can do white and clear workflows all at the same time, where you don't have to come back and reprint over, a pre-printed color image. And it's got really great high durability because of the way that the pigment is encapsulated into the ink itself. It becomes almost a plastic, if you will, and it's got a high durability as a result of it. It's got great fade resistance, great scratch resistance. Most of the inks are stretchable if you choose, depending on the stretchability factor you're looking for. Lamination, again, may not be required depending on what your application is. And the potential range of materials is much larger than any other ink. It's larger than latex, it's larger than dye sub for sure, and it's certainly larger than solvent, because there's a wide variety of different materials that you could put through a UV curable machine. And that this could be on a roll-to-roll side or even on the flatbed side. Some of the drawbacks, there's always a give and take. Some of the drawbacks on the UV curable side is that the ink is not quite as glossy as some of the other inks that are available. Although they've gotten a lot better over the past few years, they've got more of a semi-gloss look to them, or even a matte finish, depending on how you cure them. The inks are more specialized. For example, in the case of solvent, I can produce a job on a solvent, and I know I can bring it out and stretch it. With the UV curable, if I have a rigid ink, for example, for producing onto like glass or metal, that ink's not going to allow me any stretch characteristics. It's not going to allow me to go around a curve or anything like that. So you have to pick the ink which is going to be towards the application. And again, driving back to that application-centric thought process, you need to choose which ink works the best for what you're trying to achieve. And in the UV curable space, you got to make another choice, right? You got to go what flexibility range that you want on top of that. Some of the materials that you produce to, because you can virtually print to anything, may require some sort of pre-printing process, either a flame treatment or corona treatment, or maybe even a primer. In some cases, that can drive the cost of production up. But for the most part, the ink itself is a fairly inexpensive. So going back to the dye sub, which would be the cheapest in the water-based inks, the solvent and the latex would be on the higher end of that range. The UV curable is kind of in the middle. So depending on what your coverage is and what type of ink you're using, you can be anywhere between 10 and 20 cents a square foot, depending on what you're trying to do. Whereas with solvent or latex, you're 20 plus cents a square foot if you're just looking at straight ink. And then on the dye sub, you're looking at under 10 cents a square foot, but then there's the limitations of what materials you can produce with. So those are the ink types that we have available in the wide format space. Before we get into some questions, I want to show you really the thought process of what you should think about when you're looking to add a piece of equipment, right? So how do I choose a piece of equipment? There's a lot of different pieces of equipment on the market. It can get very confusing when you go to websites, and depending on which site you're looking at, they're going to try and drive you to one solution or another. That's one of the unique things about us, is that we don't really have a dog in that fight, right? We can bring you to any solution you want. But that application is the key thing here. So when you're looking at to add a piece of equipment into your business, think about what you want to do with it first. Think about the application. Think about how you're going to use it, and think about the things that you're going to do 3, maybe 4 years down the road. Think about your growth potential with that product as well. Once you've kind of got an idea of what you want to do with the product and where you might want to go, then think about the media. And this is where Reece is going to come into the conversation, right? Talk to them. They're experts about the media that's available. Make sure you understand what you can produce on. Understanding that media is going to bring you to that next step, which is the ink. So knowing what I want to do, knowing what I want to print on is going to give me an ink choice. And there may be one or more choices depending on the application. For example, with PVC stickers, I can produce that with latex, solvent, or UV curable. So there's a choice there. But navigating that question and understanding the meaning and the application first are going to be critical. Once you've got those down, that ink's going to be a much easier conversation. And that ink portion of the discussion is going to lead you to the machine. So if you're looking at a website like ours where you have 50 or 60 products to choose from, going through this thought process here will narrow that field down very quickly for you and will give you a quicker understanding of what you're trying to do. And then at that point, the discussion with us or with Reece is going to be, what's the throughput capabilities, what's the width of the machine, what features are included on it, all of that different stuff. So this is what we found to be the most efficient way to look at adding a piece of equipment, and specifically depending on what you're trying to do with it. So if I'm trying to do vehicle wraps, for example, I'm most likely going to come to a determination that solvent's going to be my first go-to, and then it's an easy choice from there. If I'm trying to produce onto a flat glass application, for example, that brings me to a flatbed conversation, but I know that the application is glass and that the media is glass, and that the ink that's going to stick to that is going to be UV curable. So it narrows down the field pretty quickly. Now it just comes down to, do I get a smaller version of it? Do I get a bigger version of it? So those questions that you ask yourself through this thought process will help navigate your choice down the road. So before we get into questions real quick, I'm going to show you some of the things that we're continuing to do for you and your families. Reece has been a fantastic partner in all this. Again, thank you for the Reece University opportunity. Webinars and education with the social distancing and everything else that's going on. We've put a lot of time and effort into this. Check our websites, check our YouTube channels, everything else. We've been partnering with media manufacturers to provide you some additional guidance on what applications you could do with the ink that we offer and the machines that we manufacture. And we've got some technical focused events as well. If you already have a piece of equipment, thank you. If you have any questions about how to be more efficient, the webinar we did the other day and some of the other technical focused events will help you with that. We're also offering special promotions where we're working with suppliers like Reece to make sure that we are as efficient as we can be with delivering the best prices and the best options for you. We've also invested quite a bit on our side to get rates and everything down for our prospective customers. So we have up to 6 months payment relief with below market rates. And we're also offering up to 18 months on 0% financing, depending on which way we want to go. And then finally, in addition to that, we're doing a lot of application ideas and files to provide you some guidance of how you can adjust your business practices so that you can work with your local companies, your local retail outlets that need signage, display graphics, anything that they need right now, which are a vital part of getting the economy back up and running. So we applaud your efforts there, and hopefully some of these resources that we provide will give you some help in that area. And then lastly, we started a program called Together We Print. If you are looking to connect with other businesses in your community, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to search print or sign on Google, but you get a ton of results and it's usually not exactly what you're looking for. So what Mimaki's done is we've put together a website where you can promote your business. And the idea is that other businesses like restaurants or any kind of retail outlet that needs this important vital signage to talk about social distancing practices or store hours, policies, whatever, will have a quick reference for you to promote on, and they'll be able to find you very quickly. They can do keyword searches within the page and everything else. So it's going to be a great resource for you to connect with your local communities. And the idea is to continue to support all families in the print community. And we don't care if you have a Mimaki product or not. We want to support you. We want to try and provide some marketing effort from our end. So this is essentially a free marketing platform for you. We will provide resources on the website, through our social media channels, and also through some of our ad campaigns, either on the web or through print. So check with us on there. And if you have any questions about that, reach out to us after. That being said, I would